Welcome to everybody as you trickle in. We're going to get started here in a few seconds, but it's good to see everybody coming in into the room. We're just going to give everyone a little bit of a chance to get settled, come into the room, and we'll start here in about 30 seconds. All right, so you see it. Where our numbers are coming up. I just want to welcome everybody to California Water Safety Coalition in collaboration with Diversity in Aquatics and USA Swimming. An opportunity for us to have this webinar and have a chance for us to get together. And so my name is John Abdou. I am currently at USA Water Polo as Chief Sport Performance Officer, and also I'm also an Associate Athletic Director at UC Irvine and a board member for the California Water Safety Coalition. And so we're happy to be collaborating with my dear and good friends at Diversity in Aquatics and USA Swimming as we all get together. You have been coming in, you see what's in the chat as you come in. If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, place that in the chat. That same chat is where you're going to use to ask questions during this. So please feel free to use that chat respectfully, not only to answer this question, but also to engage with us with questions that we can get into at the end. We're going to be respectful of people's time by starting on time and ending on time. And I couldn't be more excited to introduce our panel today. I'm grateful to facilitate this discussion with, first and foremost, Dr. Miriam Linch, who is the fearless leader of Diversity in Aquatics. And I'll let her introduce herself as the rest of the panel.
Awesome. And thank you all. I would describe myself as energetic, intelligent, and just excited to be amongst each of you here. And along with our panelists here, I feel like it's almost a friendly reunion. But as John said, my name is Dr. Miriam Linch. I'm the Executive Director for Diversity in Aquatics. I also work a piece in education. So I work amongst admin for Fairfax County Public Schools, and then as well work with Howard University. So shout out to Howard University, HU, as an assistant coach. And I'm going to kick it to Mr. Noah Wilson from USA Swimming.
Hi, everyone. I am Noah Wilson. I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator here at USA Swimming. And I'm fairly new to the program. I got hired on in May, and I'm very excited to be here.
And hello, everybody. My name is Leeland Brown III. I am the Program Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at USA Swimming. Been here about 1 year and 8 months. And if I had to describe myself in 3 words, it'd have to be curious, also creative, and then lastly, compassionate or careful. I guess it just depends on where I am, right?
Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourselves. And again, I want everybody to be engaged in this and to know where they're going. Dr. Lynch, please take us from here.
Okay, so one thing we do as a part of our DEI efforts, and whenever we open up with DEI efforts, it's important for us to do land acknowledgements and to acknowledge the land that we're standing on. For those that don't know, I'm located outside of the Washington, D.C. area, and it's home in the traditional territory of 3 tribes, and it's the Aquatic, excuse my pronounce this, the Atacostan and the Piscataway people. And so what we do with that is we acknowledge the land in which we stand on to do the programs and do the efforts in which we are able to do, we're afforded to do. And so I highly encourage you to look into where you and what territorial lands that you sit on, because land acknowledgements are a way for us to recognize Indigenous presence in our everyday lives and everyday actions in what we do. And so we have a responsibility to acknowledge the history, the community, as a nation, as our community, and as an organization. So if you haven't yet, please make sure to look up where you're at and acknowledge the lands in which you sit. So thank you, John.
Yeah, no, thank you, Miriam. And we give the honor to the land that we sit on. And what's beautiful about that land acknowledgement is that we're doing it in multiple places, right? We know that this is going to be seen and heard and collaborated on across our great country. So just some ground rules for us as we move forward. And anytime we're in this space and we're trying to work together in a diversity, equity, and inclusion educational opportunity, we want to make sure I want to say one thing for all of us. Say we're here to get it right, not to be right. So this is a space for us to work together, right, on this, right? So we want everyone to be present, to be in the moment, to be engaged. I hope there's not multiple screens open right now, right? If we could take the time to really focus in with each other, because we're going to be respectful of that time and we're going to be respectful of each other as we speak. We're also in that same space going to be able to allow people to be vulnerable and speak their truths and to be heard, regardless of where people are coming from, so that we can give each other that respect and know that this is not the end all be all. Again, we're here to get it right, not be right. If any conversation needs to continue beyond this webinar, you want to be in touch with any of us, any of our organizations, any of us individually, there will be space for it afterwards. So this is not to answer every single question and solve every inequity in aquatics in the next 55 minutes, right? We're not going to be able to do that. But this is the beginning step of that. We acknowledge the inequities that exist. We're taking the time to educate ourselves, to work together across these partnerships and to move forward. So I want us to give each other that grace and that listening and that understanding and that respect as we move forward. And unconditionally, we are starting that as panelists and we're giving it out to you. And the end result of that is our ability to focus on building community. Dr. Lynch said this at the start. She said that this is almost like a reunion amongst friends. That's because there are many organizations already being represented here. We talked about this coming from the California Water Safety Coalition, Diversity in Aquatics, USA Swimming, right, USA Water Polo, all the different places that are just even present here. Our idea is to build community because of this acknowledgement that there are the historical inequities that exist that have perpetuated the existence of inequities in aquatics, and that goes across the board, right? That's not just in the pool, it's also in the beach, it's in the ocean, it's across sports, it's across disciplines, it's across everything that we are talking about here. So this community, this aquatic community, is not going to be limited to one specific space. We're building a broad community of how we make the water safe, welcoming, and open to all. And so our focus today is to build that community and to put us in a place where we can build forward from here. And I kick it back to Dr. Lynch.
So something that we, as John alluded to, is that's our why. We understand there are systemic items in place, systemic policies, practices, mechanisms that have been in place that have created the disparities that we see today. And so when we center in our why, we can better produce what we are doing the programs for. And then we also have a different lens in what are affecting communities that are under-resourced and that are historically marginalized. And we go beyond looking at the individual to change the statistics in which we see on different levels of water safety education, on participation, and even in leadership, to then taking a reflective look at what is perpetuating the disparities we see today. And so one of the research that we've done as part of Diversity in Aquatics, and I've had a privilege of doing in my own research, is centering our why in understanding the disparities in place. We know that there were segregated policies and practices, which then led to inequities and inequalities. So looking beyond the individual to understand who has the power and influence, and then what that power and influence and those policies did to influence behavior in which you see today. And I think it's important for us to have that lens as we go into communities, to go beyond just being a checkpoint, just beyond being in there and saying, hey, we can save the day, so that you can have the opportunity to understand what we see and value for the communities in which we are trying to reach. Okay, so for us at Diversity in Aquatics, we center our why in the center because that is where we can start to eliminate barriers. That's where we can start to increase awareness and resources and educational opportunities to work with communities. Okay, and then from there, we can work with communities to create sustainable programming and partnerships that are the individual communities in which we serve. Every community is different. And we can't just have a template for all. And as John said in the beginning, we're not going to solve it all in these 55 minutes here. This is just to open your eyes and just have a different lens, and for us to have the discussion together on what would be best for the communities in which we are trying to reach. Okay. So one thing I like to do, I told you I'm from education, so I like things that make it easy to read, 1, 2, 3, count with me, all those things, but I go with the READ acronym. When we're talking about implementing diversity, we're going to take you through a journey of read. You've got to read your community. You've got to read the individuals and understand who you're trying to reach. And so that goes into reflection, education, advocate, and deliver. Read. Simple as that. Okay. And we're going to walk you through each of the steps as we go through our panelists, but we're going to start with reflect. And so I have a question for you as we talk about this, is that we all have encountered barriers in doing DEI work. So what are some of the barriers that you've either experienced, that you've seen, you've researched, that has impacted the work to do diversity, equity, inclusion in aquatic spaces? And remember what John said, I love that he included aquatic spaces, not only just in pools, what's beyond pools, right? It's our lakes, our outdoor areas, our parks and recreation, that we say at Diversity in Aquatics, it all starts with water safety education that then opens the door to opportunity. But what are some barriers to getting to that education? What are some of the barriers that you see on different sides in this space? So go ahead in the chat. There is, so many answers that could be done here and can be shared that we're talking about. We're talking about barriers in DEI work. And you don't have to be shy. Again, as we said in our norms, this is safe space. Beautiful. Thank you. We have program cost, fees, access, location resources, financial barriers. That is, water safety is not deemed a priority. Barrier to the water, transportation, absolutely. These are great, huge. And language barriers, absolutely, absolutely. And keep them coming as we talk further into this. But when we're talking about barriers, what I want us to look at, and again, remember the READ approach, we're looking at it reflective. And so we want to look at, have we looked at even ourselves as a barrier? Have we looked at our organization as a barrier? Because the work is both not only the barriers we see externally, but the barriers that we have internally to us as organizations and as individuals that we must take a reflective look and see. And one thing I loved is during the pandemic, a lot of different organizations started to move, doors started to open, and do the call to making the difference in their communities. And one of them has been through U.S. water polo. And so I'm going to ask John to share what kind of internal things did you guys see as an organization that you could change in order to make DEI work before going into the communities?
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. I think the image is beautiful. Understand the individual and the organization. So I'm speaking to you from both as the individual, as a person who played water polo from high school and stayed in the sport all the way, into adulthood, into leadership roles. Understand that I was in a minority as a person of color, right? That and feeling different, feeling on the outside, feeling and having that lived experience of what it's like, to be in that space, into moving into a leadership role at USA Water Polo, and always speaking about these things. But Dr. Lynch mentioned that we might be a little bit of the barrier. Well, early on, I would say on an individual level, I didn't give it enough of attention, enough of my fervor, enough of my energy. And after that summer of 2020, as she mentioned, right, the doors kind of blew wide open for all of us to really step up into leadership roles, and something that we did at USA Water Polo starting in that summer of 2020. And I encourage everybody to get to the end result here, and I'll share our report at the end. But we started a racial equity and reform task force at USA Water Polo. So myself and my co-chair Brenda Villa, four-time Olympian, for USA Water Polo, four-time Olympic medalist, also took on this challenge, and together we built a team and a task force that represented our entire country geographically, and all levels of diversity, and we began this work, right, where we got to reflect on ourselves individually, right, we began to educate ourselves on what's going on, and now we are at the stage of implementing and delivering a final product of what the results of these task forces are. We came up with 10 recommendations for the organization to take on, and that were unanimously accepted by our board of directors. And we've left a report of research, again, recommendations and outreach that will continue far beyond the existence of a task force. So as an organization, we were there. So at usawaterpolo.org, if you go to about the organization, you click on diversity, equity, and inclusion, you will see our final report, a final town hall meeting that reported all the results of what we are doing. Thank you, Will, for putting that into the chat so that everyone can see. The result, though, is what Dr. Lynch was talking about. We reflected on it, we stepped up, and now we're going to deliver something sustainable within the organization from a policies and procedure standpoint that will help access, education, and openness to our sport, we hope, for generations to come. But it took a lot of reflection and a lot of work, and we'll get into how that work happens here in the rest of this webinar.
Thank you so much, John, for that, and showing a tangible product of that work internally before going externally to communities. And so what we need to realize is that in order for true DEI work to happen across the board, and USA Swimming is going to talk more about how they've done that work, but to truly move it, that it's not just a checkbox, it's not just one person's job, that it's not just a picture opportunity or a photo op for your organization, that you must align. And what I love that US Water Polo showed is that they got the membership involved towards giving the recommendation to the national level. So as an organization, I ask you this, is when we're talking about implementing diversity, are we looking internally first? Are we looking internally to ourselves, to saying, what is our own vision? What is my purpose? What are my values? As well as what is my mission towards getting our organization to do DEI work? And does it align and reflective of the communities in which you seek? If you do not have leadership that is from diverse backgrounds and mind thoughts and lenses, will you be able to make a connection to the communities in which you're trying to work with? And in addition, what kind of things do you have? Do you have also the financial sorts to be able to help organizations? And I love in the chat what Courtney, you said, Courtney Adams, I'll give you a shout out. The assumption is not just having the pool solves the problem. And that's what we're getting to here, is that not just the pool, not just having access to the water solves the problem, but have we taken a step back as an organization to looking at ourselves as being open for diversity, equity, and inclusion to happen? Are we creating opportunities for our own employees or those who participate within our organization to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel valued? And that's why I really love this right here. It's the intentionality that you've got to be able to look at, and being reflective on the questions before you go and implement programs. The how, the who, the what, the why. And I love this, that it says by Dr. D.L. Stewart, and we shared this a little bit earlier in our last webinar with the California Water Safety Coalition. It talks about who's in the room, and then who's trying to get into the room but can't. And inclusion asks, has everybody's ideas been heard? And then whose ideas won't be taken seriously because they're not the majority? Is it some way in our board meetings that always the person of color is being picked last? Or do we have people that are differently abled at the table if we're doing work in that field? Do our do our resources have multiple languages that are used? Are we using resources that are easily accessible by different means? Or for instance, are we using captioning every time we have videos so that those who have different impairments are able to still engage in that conversation? And that is what makes organically DEI efforts happen, is that we have to look at ourselves as an organization. I'll tell you from the K-12 education, we have to do that as well. Anytime we're doing training, we're always making sure we have the different lens and people at the table in order to make sure that the community in which we're trying to reach is at the center point of all that we do. Okay, so I'm going to kick it over to USA Swimming with Noah and Mr. Leeland Brown to talk about Educate.
Awesome. So one, thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you, John. And again, thank you so much to the California Water Safety Coalition for allowing us to be in this space. When USA Swimming looks at education, we look at internal education and external education, just as Dr. Lynch has mentioned. So first, we must look at internally. Once we reflect and we find our gaps, what education are we taking on to learn more about the communities that we serve? So first, when we're looking at internal education and we're looking at educating ourselves, the first thing we need to do is actually connect with the community. We must actually engage the community to build the awareness, not just awareness in a book, because I had a coach that used to say a book can't teach you how to run track, right? You have to get on the track and actually do it. So books about our communities won't necessarily help us, and they're a good part of building that awareness in a community, but we actually have to go out to the community and engage with them and ask the tough questions. So at USA Swimming, before we started our recurring education, which now goes on every month, and we'll have education every single month, the second Thursday of the month, every month at 5 o'clock. If you're on this call and you want to get some education, we have education coming up this Thursday. But I say that to say the first step of building awareness for us was having 172 conversations. So myself, when I first got into the organization, I had 172 conversations, athletes, coaches, administrators internally, LSC admins, general chairs, DEI chairs, safe sport chairs, athletes, parents, volunteers, officials. It was simply to build awareness so I could understand what the needs were for those that we were educating, right? So yes, we have to build awareness for ourselves, but if we're educating people, we need to know the information, and we also need to know the themes of how we need to educate our membership. So once we got those codes, those themes from all of those 172 conversations, I outlined that much of what people put in the chat here was what our membership was actually searching for. What we didn't want to do was bring education that wasn't needed. We wanted to bring education that was truly equitable in meeting our membership where they needed to be met. And so that doing the research piece is connecting with the membership to see what needs they have, learning for ourselves, and then applying that understanding that we've gotten from the self-internal process and also the external process. So specifically, when we talk about education at USA Swimming, externally, there are two types of education. There's the cultural education, that's the DEI stuff, right? Understanding DEI. We recognize that DEI, there's a lot of misunderstandings about what those words mean. What is diversity? What is equity? What is inclusion? So the first thing we do at USA Swimming, because we recognize there was a lot of misunderstandings, we define what diversity, inclusion, and equity is. No matter when we're training, if it's our first time training with someone, we always do DEI 101. Again, setting the foundation of these words that we use that sometimes are misunderstood. So that's that cultural piece. But then there's also the technical education that we have to bring to our membership as well. We found out that swimming from a perspective from a Black coach is totally different than a perspective from a white coach. And they may have totally different access to the tools that they need to become better coaches, whether it's NAGS, a National Age Group Summit, whether it's books, right? Whether it's opportunities to grow professionally in the space as an age group coach or as an elite coach. We're able to meet them where they are because we ask the question first, what do you need? So the biggest piece for us at USA Swimming for education is meeting the membership where they need to be met, and then building education that comes from what they said they need, not our own understanding of how we're supposed to educate. We actually get to know what they need, and then we meet them where they need to be met. So another large part about education, as Miriam has already talked about, is understanding the community, truly understanding the community. And this can't be a macro level approach. This has to be a micro level approach. So understanding if you're gonna help a community, one, you have to be extremely intentional on the community that you're helping. So at USA Swimming, what we did in the last year was pilot helping communities specifically in one, assessing 2 communities. So we assessed Houston, and we helped Houston out, the Houston County Aquatics program. And then we also assessed Buffalo, the Buffalo City Swim Racers program. So I'm going to use one of those cases to talk about using this model that you've outlined that's so beautiful here, Miriam. So we're going to use the Buffalo City Swim Racers. So it says here, a community assessment provides a baseline and rationale for programs, new initiatives, and eliminates the duplication of services and programs. So a little anecdote I have here in the space is, I used to be an educator, and I opened up a school in Indianapolis. And when I opened up the school, we had this pilot program. I was helping a founder, one of our founders. We had this pilot program, and we did this big community event. Now, at this community event, we had Pampers, we had basketball, we had football, we had foosball, we had food, we had everything. It was an open house for the school, right? We're thinking we're doing perfect. This little kid comes up to me, he looks at me dead in the face, and he says, "This program's stupid." Now, I wanted to punt this little kid, right? Like, let's be honest. Come on, what do you mean? I just took all of my time, built this community program. He said 2 things. First, he said, "I don't eat the pizza that you got. I'm a vegetarian, and I only got pizza because I love pizza." And then we didn't have the sport that he wanted. He loved soccer. We had basketball, we had football, we had all of these things, but we didn't have that sport in the space. We didn't assess the community needs before we got there. Inevitably, I failed a kid because we didn't assess the family or community needs before I got there. Imagine how we're doing that without getting a baseline of the needs for communities. So whenever we're helping a community, we have to first go in and ask ourselves, who are the community stakeholders? So again, using that example in Buffalo, we knew that we wanted to help the community of Buffalo heal after the shooting that happened in the spring, right? So we wanted to help them heal after that shooting. So we went and got all of the community stakeholders. Thank you again to DIA for helping lead this process. But we went and gathered all of the stakeholders in Buffalo at that point from an aquatic standpoint. So we got the leading team in that space. We got the Thaddeus Gamery, who is a well, he's not even a water therapist, but he is a therapist and a aquatics therapist. That's the best way to put it, because he leads aquatics-based healing sessions in the water. We also got some other community stakeholders in from the education system, from other aquatics programs, from nutritional or healthcare institutions. So we got all of the people who had some type of stake in the water or in health or in nutrition. From that conversation, we move forward to understanding what was Buffalo socially and culturally like at that time that they had just come off of this shooting, right? So we had to have community conversations led by the community leaders that were in the planning meetings for the Buffalo event, right? So now we're having this dialogue of talking back and understanding what's the society like at this time. Are people disconnected? Are people scared to go outside? Culturally, what's happening? Are people disconnected? Is there a dissonance between certain people in the community now? Is there a trust in being in public buildings? Should we be holding this at a school? Should there be security at the school? Like, what's happening right now in Buffalo, right, that we can take and use in this space because of the baseline? Third, we then need to look at the actual pool. What are we working with here, right? What's there in the space? If we want to do a water safety expo or water safety event, we actually need to know the physical building that we're working with. We also need to know the physical community that we're working with. Are we situated in a food desert? Do we need to bring food? Are we situated in a community that is highly compressed? So we're looking at ghettos, American ghettos, right? Highly compressed community. Are we there in a space where we can potentially go to all of the apartment complexes within a 1-mile radius, right? To then get them over there the day of the program or before? What's the actual physical environment of where you are? And then lastly, what are the needs? So after you understand and you get people in the room, you understand what the climate is like, you understand what space you're working with. Now you can address those needs. So in Buffalo, what that looked like was we ended up having a water safety healing event that was led by Thaddeus Gamery, who did a water therapy session after we had Water Safety Expo, where we brought in nutritional vendors, we brought in healthcare vendors, brought in other athletic vendors. There was a 7-on-7 flag women's football team vendor there who came and wanted to showcase and be a part of this community work. And so that's how it panned out in Buffalo. Now, the lasting part is the results, right? One, we saw families smiling. We saw families there who were engaged to be there, grandmothers, aunts, cousins, moms, dads, everybody in the pool, everybody there. And it was a family event. And we could tell this from the smiles on people's faces that we met a community need. But the second piece is that team that we helped after taking all of these steps had 116 new team registrations within a week. 116 within a week. That is because we answered the community's call, and thus the community showed up for that team because they knew that the team could be trusted. They knew that the team cared. And they knew that the team cared more than just getting kids into the water. They actually cared about the community health. I want to ensure as well that I say, and I stop in this point, Noah got in right after we held that second program, the Buffalo City Swim Racers program. And so he was at that program, didn't have too much in the space of planning and coordinating that. And I also want to make space to say that it is not because he did not do a phenomenal job there as well. Again, he was just really new when we got here and had that program, so might not have as much to offer.
Thank you, Leeland. You know, and so as we keep moving forward, I mean, that's just amazing work and tangible results that come out of that. So we just want to ask you all again, using the chat, right? Audience question here to keep engaging here, right? What are some assets you and your organization can align in these targeted communities, right? How do we get to this point of delivering, right? And as we go through this, right? How do we get to your targeted community? So feel free to start pointing that into the chat as I kick it back over to Dr. Linch.
Now, yeah, so I mean, I love it. Just what people are saying into the chat, school transportation, aligning to the school leaders. And one thing that was really important in the Buffalo City Swim Project is that we looked as the community. We learned from the community actually a lot about the history of water and the relationship of water within that community. Water was a way of transportation out of segregated South. It is along the Underground Railroad that leads to Buffalo. And we learned about the rich history of Buffalo and its relationship to water towards what the families and who had settled in that community. And I think that's so important is that one is that, yes, we have the aquatic resources, but I love what you said, Kurt, is devoting the necessary time, investing in communities could be the best thing you do. This can go for any community. We're not just talking about historically marginalized or under-resourced, but any community in which you approach is investing that time to listen. And that's why we have that first part is the reflection part, is for you to reflect so you're able to listen to communities on what it is that they have as assets. Because a lot of times in this world that we can easily look at the statistics and look at the deficits of communities. Yes, there are an exponential amount of drownings that happen to historically marginalized populations. But what in that community where those populations are high, can we use as investments? And I wish I had it. I just saw it right before our webinar. There is a posting to get ready for the Paralympics for Paris 2024. And if you haven't yet, we just posted it on our Instagram for Diversity in Aquatics. It is a individual that is coordinating hand movements for those who are in wheelchair to celebrate the Paralympics. So they did not see that community as a deficit, but actually as an asset to celebrate the Paralympics. And are we having that same view when we go into communities in which we seek how Leeland talked about it? So I loved connecting to ocean lifeguards, learn to swim, talking about HBCUs, and that's what we do as a part of our group and what we're getting ready to do, and we'll talk more about it in December in Atlanta. So thank you guys for all the different parts of the chat. So now that we've got our read, we've got our reflection, we've got our education on how to approach what I ask you now are, which kind of advocate are you? Because while we are aquatic experts and we have a number of resources, how are you going to lead communities together? Are you going to be an ally? Are you going to be an accomplice? Or are you going to be a co-conspirator? Okay. And a lot of these spaces is allowing voices, empowering voices to take place as we go throughout. So when we're talking about allyship, each one has its benefits and each one works. You have to decide what works for you. After you've gone through the reflection, after you've gone through the education, where do you want to stand in this space with communities? And that's what you have to ask yourself, not only as an individual, but also as an organization. And so when we're talking about allyship, are you supporting communities? Are you retweeting? Are you making sure that they have like, hey, we're going to have an equipment drive, which we found out happens in Nadine in Boston does an amazing job with an equipment drive that supports other swim programs. Are you working with programs? Are you working to make sure that there's different policies or that there's a budget or that you're co-fundraising with that group? So working with them, not coming in and taking over, but really working and having everybody have a voice, like we said, at that table. And then an accomplice celebrates. Are you taking a time like, hey, let's do an Instagram takeover? Or what is it like we did in Buffalo? What is it we want to celebrate the aquatic history and highlight that to the community to have pride back in the community? Because understand that shooting that happened was devastating for the community, and a community that did not have the resource for a grocery store to know that that community was targeted. And also when we learned from the community, we also learned that there were other things that were happening there. But what we could do is work with the community and with those stakeholders, say, you know what, this happened, but we have such a rich history, but we have such great resources here. And so are we celebrating those items with the stakeholders for the community? And then are we also empowering? For us at Diversity in Aquatics, Will, I know he shared our YouTube channel. One of the big things that we do is through our webinars is allowing different voices to come to the table to talk about what they're doing on that localized level, all the way to the national level. So we're empowering different voices to be able to be heard. And that's the most important. And also amplifying so that resources and programs can happen. And the last thing, are we also protecting? I think that's one of the most important things, that the last thing, and the co-conspirator side, are you protecting communities? Are you making sure that when you're partnering with other organizations, it's not just a checkbox on their resume, or that they're getting the grant dollars and it's not being passed through? Are you making sure that communities are protected? And one of the big things that we did the Swim In for Social Justice. 2 of our members during COVID got kicked out of a pool and police were called. And it was important for us to protect our members, but also protect the community to understand that aquatic space and that resource in that community. So so we asked, like, are you going to be a co-conspirator with us? Meaning, are you going to work with us? Are you going to be an advocate, a voice? Are you going to make sure when you're at the table or in those, in the city hall, that you're saying, hey, you know what, the policy when a pool's being built that's only 6 lanes on this side in an under-resourced community, that we're also building the same, and there's another pool on another side of the community that has a different tax bracket, that they're getting equity in their budgets for what's being provided to that community? Are you that voice? Are you the one that says, no, that's not what we're going to do, or this is what we need to do to be that advocate for others? Okay, so I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Is that I know it's a lot of work. As we said, we can't do it all in 55 minutes, but understand you. I love this one that came out, is that programs don't come out of the minds of any one person or two people. It's the interaction between you as an organizer and the communities in which you work. So just something to remember, you're not alone in this effort. Reach out to communities. That's one of your first steps. And then we'll talk about deliver now.
There we go.
Over to you, Leeland Brown.
Awesome sauce. I love technology because it works perfectly until you actually need it. So with that, I'm going to make sure that we make some space for Noah here, because there are a lot of ways in which we plan on delivering, and we continue to deliver in the space here at USA Swimming, and specifically through our grant programs, specifically through our education, and specifically through our partnerships with community partners like DIA. And so again, after 172 conversations at the origination of my career here at USA Swimming, what I identified was that there were 4 E's we truly needed to capitalize on. And so that's that first piece of identifying, right? First, there were 4 E's. We needed to engage with our members better, right? We needed to actually get out of there because of COVID, a lot of challenges, things like that. The second thing we needed to do was educate our membership better, right? On what DEI was, what it is, how it lives, what it looks like, how you can actually engage in this work. The next thing we needed to do was empower our community, right? Empower them to become better swimmers, empower them to work together, empower them to connect, LSCs to connect with each other, right? Admin to connect with each other from LSCs, et cetera. And then lastly, to elevate the sport of swimming, and to elevate it via partnerships and elevate it via community intention, community work. And so what we'll do here in this space is, as a part of delivery, just speaking to one of those E's, each of these E's, really quickly in the space of delivery. And so first is engagement and becoming better in engagement. That's that collaboration and that work and that assembly piece all coming together, if you will. If we're engaging with our members, we need to be asking the tough questions, asking them what it is that they need so that we can reflect to figure out where we're missing the mark. That's a part of that delivery, right? Is truly engaging and understanding where you fit in. The second is building culturally responsive education. And as a part of our culturally responsive education, I want to make sure that Noah can speak a little bit about our education programs, again, that we spoke about earlier today.
So within our education programs, we really want to highlight, education that our membership and the communities that we are serving are wanting, hitting that, equitable education. So pulling these in, and after we have assembled and engaged with them, then we are able to figure out what specifically they're wanting out of our education, whether that is, technical coaching help, whether that is business development, but something within, this community that they might be lacking, that they need education on. And so after having these conversations and engaging with these communities, we are able to give them the education that they are specifically seeking. I think in the DEI space in general, it is very easy for us as practitioners to assume what a community wants and then therefore provide that education. But in engaging with the community, we are able to give them specifically what they are looking for in the aquatic space.
Thank you so much, Noah. And so a big piece of the delivery outside of the education is also empowerment and truly giving tools. So education is just the theory, right? You don't get to practice when you get the education piece, right? And so that empowerment piece is actually giving our members the tools that they need, because empowerment is a tool-based, application-based word, right? It's giving our members the tools that they actually need. And you see this now, we're moving from engagement to empowering, right? So we get from just talking, right, and just educating to actually empowering people to do the work themselves. That's that long-term sustainability that we're talking about. So we build awareness with things like social media. We build awareness with things like our educational programs, as we spoke about, our engagement with our members. And then we start to move towards helping them coordinate things like the Buffalo City Swim Racers healing event, right? We want to actually help them coordinate in that space where DIA is heavily there, right? USA Swimming is heavily there. We're educating them and empowering them along the way. But then we get to a space where we're no longer coordinating with them, right? We're just collaborating in the space, right? And that collaboration looks like it's being led now by an outside club. It's being led now by an outside entity that's not us. It's the club that we were helping. It's the community that we were helping. Now we're simply collaborating with them. We can show up as panelists on a webinar and we don't have to actually run the webinar, right? Which then leads some theory for us. We can now have our ideas flow a little bit more. We can be a little bit more innovative. We can be a little bit more open because we're collaborating and not doing the coordination piece. And then lastly, once we collaborate and the organization is ready to take that partnership on their own, they've been fully empowered now. It's their partnership now and they're driving doing this community work. So for us, that empowerment piece is not just It is not, and I can't say it enough, it is not just education and theory based. We also have to make it financial. I heard one of my mentors say, commitment without cash is counterfeit. That's one of the hardest things I've ever heard in my life. Commitment without cash is counterfeit. So we can commit to empowering these communities theoretically, but we also have to put our money where our mouth is organizationally to empower and ensure long-term sustainability as well. So the other E, the third E for our E4 is empowerment. And that's that's money. And that's also equipment. And that's also coaching. And that's also tools. And so this year we gave out $210,000 to HBCUs and also community teams at USA Swimming. Community impact grant teams. So teams that are specifically run by women or people of color, or they're in a community that is highly populous of lower socioeconomic families or Black and brown POC families. And so I say that all to say, in this process, we move from engagement. Education is in the middle between empowerment, and then you get to empowerment. And that's that elevation piece. Once we engage, once we educate and we empower, we're elevating the entire sport together. But I would be remiss if I didn't say the last piece of this, you all, is evaluation as well. So once you do build these programs, once you do help a community out, you have to go back to the R. You have to go back to reflecting again. You have to go back to evaluating. If you take this, once you identify the program, you collaborate with people, you do the work, you assemble, you get it done. You have to go back to identifying or evaluating where you messed up, where you could get better, where there are maybe is some dissonance in the community work of the education or whatever it is. And so all of this goes together. Thank you so much for giving us space to talk about what we're delivering. But I'd be also remiss if I didn't say DIA is delivering just as well. Water polo is delivering just as well. We're all doing this together. The work that we're doing is together. And I appreciate that we're all taking this global approach to understanding communities and then impacting them holistically.
Thank you, Leeland. Those are powerful words. But when I hear you talk, I could hear in the back of my mind, one of my mentors always telling me, do not mistake education for transformation. So we again, I said this at the beginning, right? We are not here to be right. We're here to get it right. So as much theory and research and all these things that we have to do, the call to action now comes that we want to put in the work, and we want to be collaborators with you on that work. And we maybe be coming from this on a little bit more of a macro level. Where you are on a micro level, you can impact change immediately. So taking the time to reflect on where we're at, what are we doing? Are our spaces equitable and inclusive at the moment? What do I need to do to educate myself and the people that I work with, the people that I lead in your micro communities where you're at? How can I advocate for those people who are not being included at the moment? And what can we do to deliver programming and resources and put that cash and put that time and put that energy and resources into those people so we can deliver right on this equitable action that we are looking at, we can all do. And because all of you, everyone who's on this webinar or hearing this in the future or wherever you're at, you're in a position of power and the leadership that can make a change in your aquatic space. And that's our call to action to you today, is that we're asking you to step up and to take the time to read through this, as Dr. Lynch's acronym for us, and to understand that can you leave the space that you're in better than the way you found it. And we hear this from from James Baldwin. The world is before you, and you need not take it or leave it as when you came in. Can we make this better? Can we make this more inclusive? Can we keep people in? Can we bring people in, right? And these stories that you're hearing from USA Swimming, from where you're at. So if that starts with, again, reflecting about this, getting the education you need, advocating for those people, and delivering, whether that's delivering by applying for one of the grants from USA Swimming, whether that's applying for one of the grants at USA Water Polo, whether that's not working and finding all the work that Diversity in Aquatics is doing, finding the community people that you're at in your micro areas to bring them in, all that is on you, and we're here to help support and power that. And we appreciate everyone's being in here with us today, because again, this is the global approach to water safety that we're looking at, even though we're coming from the California perspective. And Dr. Linch can give us a preview of what's to come here from Diversity in Aquatics.
Absolutely. In partnership, actually, all three of us have been talking about working on this project together. One of the things that we're doing is to celebrate historically Black colleges and universities. They are the center point of communities in education, research, and empowerment, as Mr. Brown III has indicated. So one of our events here is that for us, Diversity in Aquatics, we have two sides. We're working on certification programs for our historically Black colleges and universities, as well as developing aquatic programming, and that is in partnership with USA Swimming. And like he said, the grants that are afforded to them that they can apply to. And to celebrate that, we're doing December 16th and 17th. If you're in the Atlanta area or love to fly in, we'd love to have you. We are having a water safety festival and a swim meet. In conjunction, I would say thank you to also US Masters for making that happen, as well as the three individuals and organizations that you see on this call, US Water Polo and USA Swimming, to make this to be a celebration of historical of these historical institutions that at one point up to the 1980s had 21 swim and dive programs. And as an assistant coach at Howard University, we are the only one left. And so what we're doing through our initiatives is to make sure empowering our HBCUs that have a wealth of resources there locally, to empower them so they can empower their communities. We did it at Texas Southern University, the three of us in our organizations, and now the impact of that is similar to what you see with Buffalo Swim Racers, is that they have a team there that is well running, and now they are going to be training the lifeguards for the Houston area parks and recs, so that those pools can be open this summer. They were closed last summer before our program started. So that's the impact and the power we're talking about in that network to help save lives. But we couldn't be remiss without our partners and the many people who do help us to do the work, such as the California Water Safety Coalition. Thank you for allowing this space to amplify the voices in the field, to be able to talk about the work that we're so very proud of, but we're also very proud of on the local level, those who lead those efforts. So just want to say thank you to each of those organizations. And if you ever want to contact us at Diversity in Aquatics, I put our emails up there, and I'm sure that my colleagues will put their emails and information into the chat so that you can be able to talk to them more about the programs that we talked about today and more.
Yeah, and once again, we appreciate y'all for being here. Thank you again to our panelists, to Dr. Linch, to Noah, to Mr. Leeland Brown III, for all of you, for USA Swimming, for USA Water Polo, Diversity in Aquatics. On behalf of the board of directors of the California Water Safety Coalition, I want to give a shout out to the board for supporting these efforts and for bringing in diversity in aquatics, and for what we're trying to do here in California, but also on the national and global level in this space. So we're grateful to you all, and we're going to continue this work. And we hope that, again, there's no closure here, but that we continue to do this work together, and that you reach out as you all need us. And again, thank you for being with us today.